guys, I'm Alex. I run a small business that focuses mainly on sourdough breads and sourdough pastries. So today I am going to be showing you how to feed a sourdough starter and kind of explain a little bit on how to maintain it. So sourdough bread is a naturally leavened bread, which means that there's no commercial yeast in the bread. You create this mixture called starter, and this is what creates the rise in your bread. It's basically like a wild yeast. So sourdough starter is made from just water and flour. And what happens is you mix the two together, you leave the lid on but slightly off so it's vented, and in the air all around us is wild yeast, specifically Saccharomyces exegeus. But wild yeast is all around us, and by leaving the top of the lid open a little bit, you allow that yeast to get in there, and by feeding the starter over time, that allows the flour and water mixture to build bacteria, and this bacteria leads to the creation of your starter. So you can see this starter, she kind of has a few bubbles in her, but she needs to be fed. So what we're going to do is we're going to feed her today. So I'm going to start with our tools. We have this bucket. I'm just going to feed directly into this bucket. You can use a jar. After this feed, I'll probably switch to a clean bucket, but she's only been used one time, so we're going to feed in here. We have a kitchen scale, specifically in grams, a little baby spatula, and then the lid for this bucket as well, right here, obviously. Okay, so we also have our ingredients, which we have 80 grams of water, warm water, and then 100 grams of all-purpose flour. We stick to measuring in grams because it's more precise, especially for this scale. It's a smaller scale, so it can measure as small as 1 gram and 5/10 of an ounce, so half an ounce. And then we're feeding her, this is Diane, she does have a name. We're feeding Diane at an 80% hydration rate. So because it's 80 grams of water and 100 grams of flour, the hydration is 80%. This just means that obviously there's more flour than water, and the mixture is going to be a little bit thicker than if you were building the starter from the ground up. You would do a 1-to-1. So instead of doing 1-to-1, we feed at 80%. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our bucket, and even though it's already got stuff in it, we're still just going to go ahead and put it on the scale and zero out the whole scale. I like to add my water first. No particular reason. Just in case I add too much flour, I can kind of scrape off the flour because it's not covered in water. So we'll add our water, 80 grams, zero it out again, and then we'll add our flour right on top, 100 grams, perfect. And then we just take our spatula and mix. Now this isn't one of those things where you really want any dry pockets. There shouldn't really be a reason why you have dry pockets. I mean, obviously this, like I said, this bucket was used last night, so a few dry spots are going to kind of like stick to the leftovers on the sides, which is fine because we're not really interested in that part. We just really want this good stuff at the bottom. So I have this pointed spatula for these square buckets, just to make sure I can really get in those crevices around the bottom. But you just want to mix until it's a nice homogeneous paste. Lumps are fine because this bacteria is going to feed on this new flour and it's going to break it down. Basically, we're going to let it sit overnight, and that's just going to completely break down any lumps that it finds in there, feed on them, and create new bacteria, create more starter. All right. So feeding this starter, like I said, and keeping the lid vented, creates bacteria by letting the wild yeast get in. Let's see, we're just going to close like this. So we don't pop the lid completely on. She just kind of sits like vented like this. All right. So anyway, like I said, feeding the starter creates bacteria by leaving it open. And then the bacteria feed on the flour, and that helps to create carbon dioxide bubbles, and the carbon dioxide bubbles are what causes the bread to rise. So that's what we're looking. So this right now, you can tell on the side, it's not really bubbly yet because we just fed it. And you'll see a couple maybe on the sides right here. That's pretty normal. But what you're really looking for is for it to double in size. It's gonna smell like a little bit sour, a little bit yeasty. That's what you want. You want to take this off and you want it to smell like you want it to kind of hit you in the nose, not like a gross smell, but just kind of a slightly sour smell. But yeah, it's gonna double in size overnight. My house is a little bit colder, so it takes probably closer to like 14 to 16 hours to fully double. If your house is warmer, honestly, it's gonna take probably like 8 hours to double. But in the morning, this will be ready for me to use to go on to my next recipe. It's a really great tool to use. So I really enjoy creating a naturally leavened bread with sourdough starter, and the community really enjoys it too. A lot of people are really health conscious, and sourdough is technically a fermented food, so that helps with like your gut health and things of that nature. And it's just something that everyone can enjoy, but is actually also slightly good for you, I suppose. But I have an example here of kind of what you want a ready starter to look like. He's a little flat. This is Stefan, but you can kind of see these bubbles here around the bottom. And this means that he's like ready to go. So all these little bubbles, and he smells pretty sour. So this bad boy is ready to go. But it's really important to keep up on their maintenance. It's important that if you're going to use them daily or weekly, that you're feeding them every day. Ideally, every other day you can kind of get away with, but you'll notice a lot of loss of volume. Your breads won't rise as evenly or as good as they normally do. But yeah, so you want to feed. I feed honestly every day, sometimes every 12 hours, just because I use so much of this. Like I create bulk batches of sourdough bread. So I feed this a lot. I feed this more than the 80 grams of water, 100 grams of flour. I do it in like multiples of that. So, 320 grams of flour to 400 grams of water. Or I'm sorry, backwards. 320 grams of water to 400 grams of flour. So it's super versatile. It's super resilient as well. Like people talk about how they kill them all the time. They come back super easily. Sometimes if you transfer them from one environment to another, they don't come back as easily. But it's super easy to start over. We do sell our sourdough starter. And so when I give people their instruction sheet, these are basically the exact instructions that I give them to build it back up and maintain their starter. I hope this has given you a good look at how to maintain your sourdough starter. And if you have any questions or are interested in anything like this, please let me know.